Welcome to a new edition of the Uplift Start the Week, where we discuss subjects relevant to us women in an open and respectful manner. I am your host, Chani Schreibhand, founder and editor of the Uplift Jewish Women's Magazine. Hello, and this is another Uplift podcast where we talk about different things with so many different people from all over the world. And today we have a really special guest, and her name is Sarah Pachter, and I must tell you that this is an interview I've been really excited about because Sarah has written the most fabulous book. It's called Is It Ever Enough? A Journey Towards Joyful Living. I'm just going to show the book for those. I should really show it backwards. I don't know how to do that. But for those people who don't know about it, it's a really beautiful book. It's a full book. It's not like one of these like 3-page books. I think there's like 300, 400 pages in it. And the publisher is Feldheim. So if you want to get it, it's for sale, but she's written a few books. So Sarah, hi.
Hi, thank you so much, Hani, for having me. It is such an honor to meet you, to see you, to be on this podcast. And you should know, I don't know if you can see in my living room, I have Uplift magazine on the coffee table, which honestly, I'm particular about what's on that coffee table. That means I think it's beautiful, both outwardly and inwardly. It's a fabulous magazine. So thank you.
Thank you. You're really sweet. That made my day. Now the interview will be 100% easier. But but tell me a little bit, first of all, how did you get into writing? Where did it all start? You know, writing is a very solitary business. So let's hear how you started it.
Well, it's funny. I actually really started mostly as a speaker. I was, not inclined to write at all. I didn't, I always say if I can write, anyone can write, because I wasn't really inclined as a child. I didn't particularly like writing as a kid. I shouldn't say that on a podcast, but I really started as speaking. And if you want to see, I don't know if you want to hear the transition from speaking into writing, or if you just want to.
Why not? Yeah.
So it started really, I was living in New York. I was speaking for a organization called the Jewish Enrichment Center, which is now, I believe it's now Olami. I was traveling into Manhattan twice a week, giving lectures. And, when we moved to LA, we only had one child. So when we moved to LA, I would, go teach at UCLA, or I would teach for AISH, or all these various organizations here. And it was pretty easy because I could put my son to sleep. I could get myself ready, be somewhere by 7:30. He was still young, and it was working out. And then, as we started to have more children. I have 5 kids today, Baruch Hashem. Thank you, Hashem. And he was getting older. His needs were more, baby's needs were more. And I found myself just saying no more and more and more. And it wasn't just that, it was also, I had also.
Just stop that.
So again, the children's needs were changing, and I found myself just constantly having to say no. And additionally, at that point, I had been asked to do a teleconference on video from LA to New York City on a weekly basis. I declined that as well. I didn't feel comfortable at the time doing video. This was way before video was like a normal thing at all. And there I was, just saying no, no, no. And so I started thinking to myself, how can I still teach? How can I still impart Torah and try to give inspirational and motivational messaging if I can't physically be there in person? And so I said, maybe I'll try writing. So I did. I wrote an article. I remember the first article I wrote, I sent into the Jewish press, and it was like from a movie. I'm telling you, I remember I submitted the article onto their submission page. It wasn't even like an email or anything. It was like, here, submit what you want to write, and this such and such amount of words, send it in. 5 minutes later, I get a call from the editor-in-chief of the Jewish press. And he's like, is this Sarah Pachter? And I'm like, yeah, and he says, man, was that you who just sent in that article? I said, yes. He says, well, if you have stuff like that, you send it directly to me. I'll put it in every time. And I'm thinking, and I wasn't confident as a writer. So I'm like, do they do this to everybody? You know what I mean? Like, I was kind of like,
I
oh, maybe
think
this is just what they
sometimes a natural voice. I think that's very, very, very much about your writing. You're a very natural voice. You say a story
Oh, I'm so
that's
grateful
so
that you're
natural.
generous.
Now I really find that, and it's because it's so naturally written, people really relate to it. It's not full of, we're not going to grammatize, and it's not about that. It's about what you're saying. And it sounds like you're talking to them. And I think that's why it's it resonates so well. I really
Thank you.
feel.
It's funny that you say that there's two things. It's funny that you say that it sounds like I'm talking to them, because I actually think that speaking and writing are completely different skills, and it was a hard transition for me, even though making it sound like, oh, it was so easy and they wanted
No,
it
it's
right
not
away.
easy.
It was really tough for me. I had to learn the skill of writing. When you're talking, you got to be exuberant and you got to repeat and you've got to talk like you're having a conversation. And when you're writing, you need to sound like refined and like a professor with maybe a drop of personality, you know what I mean? And so it's hard. You can't repeat, and you got to be succinct, and you got to just say it. And it's very, very different. So I know you're saying there's talent there, but for me, I feel like it
You
was a
had to
lot of
work
hard
on that
work.
challenge. It was a challenge. It's interesting
And
because
yes,
me too. I mean, when I started this whole magazine, I really was not a writer. I was brought up by a writer, but I wasn't a writer at all. And it was just something that I started for a different reason. And then because I started, I had to start writing. And all of a sudden, it was like a floodgate opened, and I had so much to get down on these papers. And it's
that's
interesting
right.
because it's really shown a completely different side of myself. Like even in
It's
school, like you
beautiful.
say, I really was bad at English, but it's interesting how it opened up my whole mind and everything. I think it's
Oh, for
really,
sure. I mean,
yeah, I think
go
it's
ahead. Sorry.
really important that women, even if you're not, we keep on saying this. I say this at I think every single podcast we get, we have the same message, and it's always don't be scared of the unknown. Just do it.
Yes.
You never know what that unknown will bring you.
Exactly. And on that note, I have to tell you, it's exactly that overcoming that fear, which enabled me to write 2 books and to start speaking and to do all these kinds of things. Because here's kind of what I think is like the core of life, or the core of how to get yourself past where you are now and then get you to where you want to go. I think, and I truly believe, everyone has strokes of brilliance. Everyone has creative ideas. Everyone has things that can really make a difference in the world. And then what happens? We have this genius idea, we have this creative thought, and we hesitate. And instead of that hesitation, right? Instead of telling the boss the great idea, or making the call that you need to make, or sending, that email plus pressing click on that send, we hesitate. And in that moment of hesitation, that is where the critic inside of you says, who do you think you are?
Yeah,
You think you're going to do that?
yeah,
Right.
you're
And I have
right.
another question. That question is, who are you not? Who are you not to create? You've been given a neshama. You're a piece of God. Like,
Given a
who are
talent, and it's a major thing to use these talents. We're given them. It's a gift. It's
right?
not.
Oh,
It's not a throwaway. It's a gift, and it's amazing to use it. Okay, so now I heard how you got to it, but now how do you? I love the way you. Let's say. I mean, I know this is going to appear in the next one, but let's say you're skiing holiday or something like that. It's amazing
okay.
to take these examples and how you really bring them into everyday life. So are you constantly looking for these things, or do they come?
That's such a great question. And you're not the first person that asked me that. I was actually talking to my editor who edits some of my work, and she's brilliant. I tell her she's the magic wand. I give her something and she just transforms. And she said to me, she's like, how did you think of that? And I'm like, what do you mean? you don't think like that? And she's like, no, I never would have thought like that. So it's funny that you're saying, do I search out for it? No. Sometimes it happens, these ideas, these analogies, they happened in the darndest times, like Shabbos afternoon when you can't write it down and somehow you got to remember, or, I'm trying to fall asleep at night and I'm like, oh, I have to write that down, and it sounds silly, but I do believe that when you have a stroke of creative thought, or you have an idea that you think has depth, or as I mentioned before, you have, that brilliant idea or whatever it is, and you have something that you want to do something with, when you sit down and when you take a minute to write it down or do something active with it, it's actually a way of telling yourself, I'm important and I have value and my thoughts are important. And so it's really good for your self-esteem also, even if you end up doing nothing more than just writing it down or that initial step, it's just a way of letting yourself know, hey, I have value.
That's very good. But,
I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
we had I don't do it as much, but I'm going to again do it. I should actually get you involved with it. But what I want to do is put together, we have such great writers in the magazine. We really do. And a lot of them have so much interest, so many interesting things to say. And I thought that, we could make like a group of all these writers, and like once a month or something, just have prompts or something, and just as an exercise, because I really feel that sometimes just to expand on what you're thinking and think of it in a different way is a marvelous thing. And I really, I see that in your work, that you really expand and go completely, like you say with the skiing, off piste. So
really, I remember, every time we go skiing, I always have an article that I come home from that trip with. Just, I think the quiet and the being alone with yourself. I mean, I'm not alone, I'm skiing with my family, but in the actual moment, you're kind of by yourself skiing down.
My dad says the same thing, by the way.
Yeah, I
Snow
think
really helps.
Yeah, and I think the quiet, I think really any time that you're in a quiet zone, whether it's on the slopes or in your home, when we remove distractions, we can really hear that inner voice, of thought and of inspiration. And that's, I think, when it comes, is when we're not busy and distracted, and the phone's ringing and I got to answer this. It's those moments. I think it's really there all along. We just have to let it be heard,
Let me ask you, you say you have a family,
Yes.
and it's not easy to find that quiet space in that. So what do you do? Do you make a calendar time? This is my time to write, or do you just, as the day goes, see how you're doing?
So that's an excellent question. And yes, there are 5 children, and I have basically been expecting or nursing for the past, 16.
Yeah.
My son actually just turned 16. He just got his license yesterday, which is amazing and terrifying all at once. And I also have, my youngest is 2 years old. So I have the gamut.
I know, you only have
And I think, I'm very, very, very structured with my time. I manage my time very well. If I didn't, there is no way I would have been able to do any sort of writing, especially during COVID. I mean, that was when everybody was home at all times. So what I do is I actually make a commitment to myself. It's actually kind of a funny story, if I can tell you.
Yeah, definitely.
It was several years back. I was interviewing for a position as a teacher somewhere, and I didn't really want to do it because I didn't want to I won't share why, but I didn't particularly want to have the job anyways. But I went in, and he asked me, he said, where do you see yourself in 10 years? I said, well, I want to write a book. And he said, really, you want to write a book? He said, how are you going to do that? And I answered him, looked him right in the eye, and I said, I'll write for 10 minutes a day. And he kind of laughed. He was like, okay, right? How do you think that's going to get you where you want to go? 10 minutes. Well, I decided to commit to writing 10 minutes a day. Obviously, many times it turns into much more than that, but the way I kind of conquer my Yetzer Hara or my, non-desire to work is I say, all right, 10 minutes, put a timer on. And if I do more, great, but I have to do at least 10 minutes. And that has yielded the 2 books that has yielded hundreds of articles. Thank God I've been published in mainstream media such as the LA Times and the New York Post and, Wyoming this and all over the place.
Was it
Not
hard
just
to get into that for you? Because people are always talking about, we always write only for the Jewish community, but I don't think that that's true, because a lot of our articles, anyone's articles, most writers could write to anybody if they're giving a good message.
oh
So,
sure.
so do you find that hard to have gotten into, or?
It is hard. Some of it has happened without my even knowing about it. For example, the LA Times reposted an article of mine from Aish. The
Wow.
New York Post reposted an article of mine from Aish as well. So,
You
and
write a lot for Aish, actually. We should make that clear that you.
yes, I do. I write a lot for Aish.com. Absolutely. That is like probably the bread and butter of my writing nowadays. I do a lot for Jewish Press and Ami and Jewish Home. I was doing a lot. I had several columns, but now I'm really working a lot with Aish.com. Thank God, they're wonderful, wonderful. But I think that when the topics are universal, it's about being a human. You don't even have
That's exactly what I feel.
You know what I mean?
But somebody was saying at one point, somebody was giving this whole talk to writers, and she was saying, well, you can't write to the open community because of all these stereotypes of the leftists and I said, you're wrong. I said, if you stick to who you are and you're giving your message, which is a unique message, it's coming from a Jewish heart. I said, why wouldn't you do that? And she couldn't understand what I was trying to say, but I'm really very, very strong about it, that if we keep to our roots, and if we are, respectful of who we are,
Yes.
then we could write and it could be read anywhere.
Yes, agreed, 100%. I do think that there is validity to what your friend is saying in terms of it's a balance, and not everybody is going to accept work from an Orthodox Jewish perspective, 100%. So there is validity to what she is saying, but I do think that there is something that is universal enough that everyone can appreciate. You know what I mean?
100%. And I also said that sometimes you have to have a gather anyways. You have to make yourself a border and say, do I want to be writing for that? If they can't accept what I am, then obviously their vision of the world is much different than mine. So yeah.
It's funny. I also, just speaking of, is it hard to penetrate the LA Times? I was emailing with someone there and I had a story that I wanted to bring to light. And he turned and he very honestly said to me, I think we want it from their perspective themselves. Like, why don't you have them reach out and tell us that story? I said, absolutely. So for me, it's not about, I have to be the one to share the story. If there's a great story out there, I don't care if it's me or someone else or the person themselves. I just want to get positive messaging out there and stories of resilience and stories of just.
I think that's another important thing to bring out. What is your key message? When you write a book of such, a big book like that, you have to have one key message that you're trying always to bring out and to get that message across. What would you say your key message is?
So I think a lot of the messaging in all types of things that I'm writing, whether it's an article on marriage or an article on parenting or any sort of book that I'm writing, I think what it really boils down to is that desire to feel happy and satiated inside, and feeling like what we have is enough, and feeling that who we are is enough. And then, in the book that I had recently written, Is It Ever Enough? There's a section called that's enough out of you, which is a whole section on difficult people and difficult relationships. I think
that with the kids, actually.
Yes, and parenting. And I think when you strip everything else away, it's about being besimcha with ourselves. And that requires thought process, and that requires changing the way that we think and opening up our perspective. Simcha is sham moach. Where are your thoughts? And when you really uncover where your thoughts are, you start to feel happier and focus your thoughts on happier things. And I think underlying it all, that's really what I'm saying. And then the truth is, there's another message that I think is very prevalent, and maybe it's a little bit more prevalent in the first book that I wrote, which is called Small Choices, Big Changes, which is a little bit more, motivating yourself to action. And I think that when I look back on my life and I think about all the major turning points in my life, it really boiled down to saying yes, and to saying yes before I was ready to say yes. Along the lines when you asked me, how did I start writing? So it's funny because I had submitted an article to the Jewish Home, which is a paper here in LA. Someone said, oh, you should write to them. Okay, fine. So I wrote them an article, sent it in. And after writing that first article and that first article being published, the editor called me up. I remember I was loading the dishwasher in my kitchen. Okay. I'm on the phone while I'm loading dishes. And he's like, do you want to write a column? And I'm thinking, right? I had that hesitation because the critic inside of me was doing the calculations and was like, Sarah, you can't write a column, right? I've only written, a couple articles here and they take forever. It takes weeks, a month to write one article. So I'm like, well, how many times would I have to do this a month? And he says twice a month. And I'm calculating and I'm like, no, don't do it. You can't do it. You don't have time, right? That's the critic. But my mouth just formed the word yes. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. And the same thing with speaking earlier, many years prior, when I had, it's funny, I was actually asked to substitute for Rebbetzin Leah Cohn. This was very last minute for the Jewish Enrichment Center, and they just needed somebody desperately. And I was only 20 years old when they asked me. And when they found out my age, they're like, oh my gosh, we don't want her. No, she's only 20, no way.
Too young.
But it went well. And they asked me actually to go to Israel to lead trips. I went with my husband, with my son. I was their female speaker. But after that trip to Israel, so I gave probably 3 or 4 lectures on that trip throughout Eretz Israel, came home and they said, okay, we want to hire you. We want you twice a week to give a lecture. Again, I'm doing the whole calculation. Wait a minute. I only have 4 lectures under my belt. I don't know how I'm going to find the time. No. And then I just said, sure, I'll do it. I didn't know how with both the writing and the speaking. I didn't know when. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I said yes. I did not allow that critic to stop me.
That voice, it's a voice. It's a very strong voice. I was interviewing someone else earlier today, and we were talking about different businesses and how young girls are entering the business world and how they should, how to give them the courage to do things and not to feel, what happens if I don't succeed? I'm going to be a failure. And I was saying, but something, the failures that you have and all the things that is what makes you into who you become as a successful person, because 100%. You failed. Definitely.
But it's funny. We are not only terrified of failing, we're also terrified of success. If you think about it, we are afraid of all sorts of change, whether it's good or bad, or how am I going to be big enough to be that successful person? That's why many women have the imposter syndrome, when they become successful, because we deep down, we're kind of scared of success too.
Yeah, we are. Actually, you're right. You're 100% right. Yeah, I never thought of it that way. But that's
if it's lose either way, if it's fear either way, go for the gold. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So now let's say we're going to give somebody who's listening to us and who's really impressed. I am going to get myself up. I'm going to do this. What would the advice that you would give her?
Yeah, it's actually, I think it's advice from Mel Robbins. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's a motivational speaker. She's very famous here in America. And she calls it her 5-second rule, where she says you count down from 5. And I've used this before, and I cannot tell you how many life-changing things have happened for me personally from this little 5-second rule. Basically, your brain will come up with a way to stop you if you do not act within 5 seconds. So you count down from 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, like a rocket ship, you press send, you make the call. You do the thing that you're afraid to do, even if it's a tiny action. And that little spark of motivation creates the ball rolling. A body in motion stays in motion, and a body at rest will stay at rest. So you just got to get that activation energy like a rocket ship. Count down from 5, say, I'm doing it. I'm telling you, this is how I actually started speaking for Pesach programs, was from that 5-second rule. I made the call, and it's funny right now.
Guys. I really like that one. Really great.
Literally,
We're
honey,
coming up to the end. I don't want it to go off before we
sure,
get to the end.
for
But
sure.
before we get to the end, I just want you to, tell us first of all where we could get your books. Do you know, are they still in publishing? What's the
So on Amazon.com, they're available. Most major Jewish bookstores. I don't know about the distribution in the UK. I believe there are definitely stores with it. I don't know which one though, unfortunately.
okay.
Amazon has it. I also actually have a distribution project where different sponsors will reach out to me and donate books for lectures that I give. I'm actually speaking in Denver on Tuesday. That's fully committed in terms of sponsorship, but that has been really successful. And to me, one of the best parts of that is someone will approach me and they'll say, hey, I received a book at your lecture, and my husband and I, I decided to start lighting candles, and my husband and I are using a technique from your book for marital harmony. And to me, that's everything, because then it's not just about me sharing Torah, it's about the whole world kind of joining together and saying, let's
That's
spread
beautiful.
Torah to people who may not
Sarah's
normally.
really beautiful. Anyways,
Yeah.
I'm really, really excited that we
Thank you.
finally got to touch base, talk,
Thank
and
you.
you could definitely read Sarah's, first of all, in our last magazine. That's the last one. And
Beautiful.
we are also going to have it in our next magazine. And I'm really working very slyly at her becoming our fixture of a writer, because she's
Oh,
fabulous.
thank you. Thank you for your
And
time.
I'm really excited that we met. So
Thank you.
thank you very much, Sarah, for coming, and everybody else. I'll see you next week when we have another great interview on the Uplift podcast. Thank you.
Bye.